The first mistake the Varco Recon flotilla made was laughing. Commander Threxcall was still in the middle of a long, theatrical yawn when the navigation officer announced, for the third time, that they had crossed into Terran space. The bridge lights glowed a lazy blue, status panels showed nothing but empty void, and the long-range scanners returned the same result they had for the last 6 light hours: silence. No stations. No patrols. No trade beacons. Nothing that suggested a species worth fearing. Threxcall flexed his armored mandibles and chuckled, the sound clicking across the bridge like falling cutlery. "So," he said, stretching all 6 limbs, "this is the home of the so-called Deathworlders." A few officers snorted. Someone in tactical made a gagging noise. The myth of humanity had circulated through the outer systems for decades. Apes from a brutal planet, endlessly inventive, dangerously stubborn, but myths had a way of inflating themselves. Threxcall had personally overseen the pacification of 3 star systems, all of which had once been described as unconquerable. Empty space, he decided, suited humans perfectly. It was exactly what a frightened species would leave behind. The second mistake was assuming emptiness meant abandonment. Lieutenant Koreth, barely old enough to have polished the dullness off his carapace, leaned toward his console and frowned. "Commander, there's something odd about the background radiation." Threxcall waved a claw dismissively. "Solar noise. Or debris echoes. Increase speed. I want to be halfway to their inner colonies before the rest of the fleet finishes arguing over who gets credit." The flotilla surged forward, engines humming with relaxed confidence. 5 sleek warships, weapons powered down to minimal levels, drifting like predators who believed the hunt was already over. On one of the auxiliary channels, the communications officer was playing a betting game with engineering, guessing how long it would take before they found their first human settlement. The current wager was 12 minutes. The loser would clean plasma vents. That was when the third mistake occurred, and it came in the form of a joke. A low-priority message blinked onto the comms panel, unencrypted and almost insultingly casual. The signal carried no official markers, no threat codes, no military identification. Just text, rendered in basic galactic script. "Welcome. You're early." The bridge went quiet. Threxcall leaned forward slowly, amusement flickering into curiosity. "Trace the source." The communications officer's frills flushed a nervous yellow. "Commander, it's everywhere. The message isn't coming from a single point. It's embedded in the background signal itself." Laughter broke out again, sharper this time, edged with uncertainty. "Psychological warfare," Tactical said. "Crude. Humans love theatrics," another officer added. "They're probably broadcasting from some hidden relay, trying to sound clever." Threxcall nodded, though a faint itch crept along his spine plates. "Reply," he said. "Standard declaration. Inform them their space is now under Varco reconnaissance authority." The message went out. The response came less than a second later. "We know who you are. We know how many ships you brought. You missed the warning buoy." The bridge displays flickered. Not alarms, those would have been comforting, but something subtler. Sensor noise smoothed out, sharpened, reorganized itself. The void ahead of them didn't fill with ships. It didn't glow with weapons fire. Instead, space itself seemed to blink. Koreth swallowed. "Commander, I'm detecting mass fluctuations. All around us." "They were massed? Perfectly massed?" "Impossible," Threxcall snapped, but his voice lacked its earlier ease. "Nothing can hide that many signatures without wanting to be found," his mind finished. The flotilla slowed as if instinctively treading water. Then the stars changed. Where there had been emptiness, faint outlines emerged, angular shadows against the cosmic background, resolving into structures far larger than any single ship. Not fleets. Not stations. Something else entirely. Lattices of metal and energy spanning millions of kilometers, silent and patient, woven through Terran space like a net no one had noticed because it had never moved. A human voice replaced the text channel, calm, almost cheerful. Varco Recon Flotilla, it said. This is Terran Automated Defense Grid Node 17. For the record, you didn't miss the warning buoy. You ignored it. Threxkull felt his mandibles tighten. You hide behind machines? He demanded. Show yourselves. A pause. Then a soft laugh. Oh, we are. The first shot did not look like a weapon. There was no beam, no missile trail, no dramatic flare. One moment the lead Varkal ship existed, shields idling, crews still processing what they were seeing. The next moment, a section of space inside its hull simply wasn't there anymore. The ship folded inward, crushed by forces that never touched its exterior, and vanished in a silent implosion that left only debris drifting where confidence had been seconds before. Red alerts screamed to life. Shields up! Multiple targeting solutions! Commander, we're locked from all vectors! Threxkull stared at the expanding tactical display, horror replacing arrogance. Terran space was not empty. It was full of traps, of patience, of a species that had learned the galaxy was watching and decided to wait until someone was foolish enough to stop laughing. And somewhere in the void, the human voice spoke again, warmer now. Welcome to Terran space, it said. Now you're right on time. The fourth mistake the Varkal made was trying to fight like everyone else. The remaining 4 ships scattered instinctively, engines flaring as they attempted evasive patterns drilled into them since hatchling cycles. Threxkull barked orders, his voice sharp with urgency now, demanding countermeasures, targeting solutions, anything that resembled control. Weapons came online in a scramble of power spikes, plasma capacitors whining as they charged toward lethal thresholds. Nothing fired back at them. Instead, space bent again. Commander, Koreth said, voice trembling despite himself. The grid is reconfiguring. It's not static, it's responding. Predicting. Threxkull watched as the tactical display tried and failed to keep up. The lattice structures were shifting position without visible movement, sliding through folded space like thoughts rearranging themselves inside a larger mind. Every time a Varkal ship adjusted course, the net adjusted faster, closing angles, sealing escape vectors that hadn't existed a second earlier. This is an ambush. Tactical hissed. A kill box! Another human transmission cut through the chaos, oddly conversational amid the screaming alerts. Just so you know, we're not actually targeting you yet. Threxkull slammed a claw into his command console. Then what do you call that? He snarled, gesturing at the drifting wreckage of his lead ship. Calibration, the voice replied pleasantly. We like to be precise. The flotilla fired. Blue-white plasma lanced outward in disciplined salvos, converging on one of the visible lattice nodes. The beam struck, then curved, as if embarrassed by the attempt, sliding harmlessly into empty space. Energy readings spiked, twisted, vanished. Commander, engineering said, panic leaking through professional restraint. Our weapons are being redirected. Not reflected. Rewritten. A second Varkal ship shuddered violently as its own missile salvo arced backward, detonating against its shields in a blinding flash. The crew screamed as feedback surged through their systems, frying consoles and turning calculated aggression into self-inflicted chaos. Threxkull felt something cold settle in his core. Humans weren't overpowering them through brute force. They weren't meeting strength with strength. They were letting the Varkal exhaust themselves, revealing every habit, every assumption, every predictable response, and using it against them. Stop firing! He roared. All ships cease fire! The order came a second too late. A third ship vanished, crushed between converging spatial distortions that squeezed it like a thought being erased. No explosion. No warning. Just absence. The human voice returned, gentler now. Good. That saves us time. What do you want? Threxkull demanded, forcing his terror into something like dignity. Tribute? Surrender? You could have destroyed us already. Yes, the voice agreed easily. We could have. But that's not the point. New data flooded the bridge. Historical overlays. Sensor replays. Visual feeds from angles Threxcall hadn't known were observable. Images of Varco raids on weaker systems. Of civilian transports cracked open for supplies. Of planetary defenses overwhelmed and mocked before being erased. Koreth stared at the screen, horror etched into his young features. Commander, they've been watching us. For cycles. Not just you, the human said. Everyone. Terran space looks empty because we stopped advertising. Stopped posturing. Stopped responding to provocation. You know what happens when you do that? Threxcall said nothing. They come to check. The voice continued. Just like you did. The lattice tightened further. Escape routes collapsed into dead ends. Jump calculations failed as space-time constants fluctuated unpredictably. The Varco's greatest advantage, their mastery of aggressive expansion, meant nothing against an enemy that treated physics like a suggestion. Commander, engineering whispered, we can't jump. We can't outrun them. We can't even lock onto them. Threxcall straightened, armor plates settling with finality. Open a channel, he said quietly. All frequencies. The bridge crew froze, staring at him. We acknowledge Terran dominance. Threxcall transmitted, every word tasting like ash. State your terms. For a long moment, there was only the hum of failing confidence and the distant groan of stressed hull plating. Then the human voice spoke again, no longer cheerful, but not cruel either. Our terms are simple, it said. You're going to listen. The lattice paused, holding the remaining Varco ships in a perfect, terrifying stillness, alive, intact, helpless. This is the part, the human continued, where most species realize Terran space isn't empty at all. It's full of lessons. And somewhere deep in Threxcall's mind, beneath fear and fury, a dreadful understanding began to form. This wasn't a battle yet. It was a demonstration. The fifth mistake began as hope. For a brief, fragile moment, Threxcall believed listening might be a path to survival. The lattice had stopped tightening. No new distortions crushed their hulls. Power fluctuations stabilized just enough to suggest restraint. Around him, the bridge crew breathed again, shallow and afraid, clinging to the idea that the humans wanted surrender, not annihilation. Then the stars went dark. Not literally. Terran space was still there, but every external feed on the bridge blinked out simultaneously. No visual. No sensor data. No background radiation maps. The universe beyond the hull simply ceased to exist, replaced by a uniform black punctured only by internal reflections of terrified Varco faces. Commander, Koreth whispered. We're blind. Yes, the human voice said calmly, now coming from everywhere and nowhere. You are. The ship shuddered as gravity shifted sideways, then inverted, then normalized again. Crew members slammed into restraints. Consoles sparked. Artificial gravity screamed in protest as its parameters were rewritten mid-cycle. Threxcall roared in fury. This is torture. You said you wanted us to listen. We do, the human replied. But listening isn't passive. Listening is uncomfortable. Sometimes it hurts. The blackness peeled back, not into space, but into images. The bridge walls themselves became screens, flooding the crew's vision with impossible clarity. Worlds burned. Cities collapsed. Varco warforms marched through alien streets, while civilians fled, screaming. The footage wasn't grainy or distant. It was intimate. Ground level. Close enough to see fear reflected in compound eyes not unlike their own. Threxcall staggered back. Stop this! Why? The human asked. This is standard Varco doctrine, isn't it? Shock. Ah. Total dominance. You're proud of it. The images changed. Now it was human worlds, lush, blue, crowded. Colonies tucked into asteroid belts. Habitats spinning peacefully in the void. And then the overlays appeared. Firing arcs. Vulnerability points. Casualty projections climbing into the billions. We ran these simulations when we first detected you. The voice continued. Every possible outcome if we behaved like everyone else. If we rushed out. If we warned loudly. If we tried to scare you. The projections ended the same way every time. Human extinction. So we didn't, the voice said softly. The lattice snapped inward. The remaining Varkal ships were yanked closer together, space folding until they were clustered within visual range, hulls groaning as physics struggled to keep up. Emergency lights bathed the bridge in red. Structural integrity warnings cascaded in overlapping screams. This is the confrontation phase, the human said. For us. A massive silhouette emerged from the darkness. Not a ship. Something bigger. A construct so large it made the Varkal dreadnoughts look like escort craft. It wasn't sleek or elegant. It was blocky, asymmetrical, layered with scars and protrusions that told a long story of function over beauty. Human. Weapons unfolded across its surface, not glowing, not charging dramatically, just aligning. Hundreds of them. Thousands. Kinetic rails. Gravity shear projectors. Reality anchors that pinned space-time itself in place. Commander, engineering sobbed. That thing is locking us down at the quantum level. Threxkull felt his courage cracking, but he forced himself upright. If you're going to kill us, he snarled into the open channel. Do it. Prove your strength. The human voice paused. Then it laughed, not mockingly, but with something like sadness. You still don't get it. The construct fired. Not at the ships. At space. The void between the Varkal vessels collapsed inward, compressing into a single point before rebounding violently. The shockwave tore through hull plating, snapped weapon mounts, and crushed internal decks. One ship ruptured, venting atmosphere and crew into nothingness. Another lost half its mass in a silent, horrifying shear. Threxkull's ship survived, barely. Life support failed on 3 decks. Power dropped to emergency reserves. Half the bridge went dark. Koreth lay motionless, blood pooling beneath his shattered carapace. The human construct loomed closer, filling every remaining external feed. This, the voice said, cold now, unmistakably resolute, is us holding back. Threxkull finally understood. Humans weren't defending territory. They were enforcing a boundary, one drawn not on star charts, but in consequence. Every trick, every doctrine, every brutal efficiency the Varkal had perfected over generations meant nothing against an enemy that had weaponized patience, perception, and restraint. We choose, the human finished. Who gets a second mistake? The lattice tightened once more, stopping just short of crushing the last ship into debris. The confrontation hung there, balanced on a knife's edge. And Threxkull knew, with terrifying clarity, that the next human decision would define not just his fate, but the legend of his species. The 6th mistake would have been begging, and Threxkull did not make it. Silence stretched across the shattered bridge, broken only by the ragged hiss of failing life support and the distant groan of a hull that knew it should already be dead. The human construct hovered outside, impossibly steady, its weapons no longer aligning, its presence less like a predator poised to strike and more like a mountain that had decided whether an avalanche was necessary. Threxkull looked at what remained of his crew. Veterans who had laughed at empty space now stared at nothing, eyes dull with shock. Koreth was gone. So were thousands of others, erased not by rage but by demonstration. The lesson was complete. The only question left was what humans did after teaching. He opened the channel again, his voice hoarse but steady. We will withdraw, he said. We will record this encounter exactly as it happened. We will mark Terran space as forbidden. The reply did not come immediately. When it did, the human voice was quieter, stripped of performance and power. You're going to do more than that. New data appeared on the surviving consoles, coordinates, protocols, encoded legal frameworks. Not threats. Instructions. You're going to return home. The voice continued. You're going to tell your council what you saw. And then you're going to deliver something we've been waiting for. Threxkull frowned despite himself. What could you possibly want from us? Perspective, the human said. You're respected among expansionist species. Feared even. When you say Terran space isn't empty, they'll listen. The lattice began to loosen. Slowly. Deliberately. Like a fist opening one finger at a time. Escape vectors reappeared, not traps this time, but clean corridors through folded space, precisely calculated to lead the surviving ship out without incident. Power stabilized. Gravity normalized. The universe cautiously returned. You're letting us go? Threxkull asked, disbelief cracking his composure. Yes, the human replied. Because fear fades. Stories don't. The massive construct began to withdraw, dissolving back into the lattice until it was just another shadow among shadows. One more thing, the voice added, almost as an afterthought. If you, or anyone else, cross this boundary again, we won't explain it twice. The channel closed. Terran space went quiet. Not empty. Never empty. Just watchful. Hours later, as the battered Varkal ship limped beyond the edge of human territory, Threxkull finally allowed himself to collapse into his command cradle. He replayed the encounter again and again, not to relive the fear, but to understand the restraint. Humans could have erased them. Instead, they had chosen to be remembered. Weeks later, in chambers carved from obsidian and tradition, the Varkal High Council listened as Threxkull delivered his report. There was no embellishment. No attempt to save face. Only facts, sensor data, and the cold truth that Terran space was a deliberate illusion, one designed by a species that had survived itself long enough to understand the galaxy. When the chamber finally fell silent, an elder spoke the words that would ripple outward through trade routes, military doctrines, and whispered warnings. Mark Terran space, the elder said. Not as hostile. Not as contested. The glyphs burned onto the star map. Untouchable. Far away, back within the lattice, a human engineer leaned back in her chair, sipping lukewarm coffee as diagnostic lights returned to idle green. Another shift complete. Another lesson delivered without firing a war. Think they got it this time? Someone asked over the internal channel. She smiled faintly. They always do. Eventually. Beyond her viewport, Terran space remained calm, patient, and deceptively quiet, full not of ships on parade, but of people who had learned the most dangerous thing in the universe was being underestimated. And if you want to hear more stories from the edge of Terran space, where humanity doesn't shout, doesn't posture, and never fires first unless it's already too late, subscribe to the Void Narratives, and stay with us among the stars.